Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Liz and today is going to be a little different than the normal, I guess you can say, beauty related videos. I did state this before that I will be recommending some horror films because I absolutely love them. And everyone's probably in quarantine about this time and I figured why not. So hopefully I can get this video edited down to about 10 minutes. So the title will be something about top 10 recommended fill in the blank movie in 10 minutes. First disclaimer is the based on true horror films. You know, we all know Hollywood, and Hollywood tends to exaggerate almost everything, and they get like a loosely based off because it's probably one minor detail and then they spin off a whole horror film about it, and other times they're very accurate. So today is going to be my top 10 recommended based on true stories horror films. So if you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking at my notes. And yeah, so let's just get started. So the first movie I'm going to recommend, and again, this is not in any top 10 best to worst, or you know, these are just movies I recommended. Also, I don't like movies that are anything like before the time I was born, and I was born in 1997, so some were 1996, but you wouldn't find a movie earlier than that because I just don't like them, and I don't like black and white movies, so you're not going to find them on any of the movies I can recommend. Just going to tell you now. Maybe a couple might slip through the cracks because I appreciate some early films. So in this category, all of these are rated R. All the movies in this list are either going to be categorized under the genre horror, thriller, or slasher. So the first one is Silence of the Lambs. So Silence of the Lambs was released in around 1991 and the director was Jonathan Demme. I'm sorry if I'm getting these wrong. So, I'm not going to get any of these names right. I'm going to tell you this right now. The movie runs about 2 hours and 18 minutes. For me, it depends because horror movies are usually under the 90-minute range. I just like to tell people the time and the length. The movie also got a 96 rating on Rotten Tomatoes. If anybody cares about that, I will give the ratings. Either I'll say it or I'll just pop it up. This movie stars Jodie Foster and she plays Clarice, and Scott Glenn, who plays Jack Crawford, and Anthony Hopkins, who plays Dr. Hannibal Lecter. Basically, this guy named Crawford wants this girl named Clarice to interview Dr. Lecter. Dr. Lecter is a psychiatrist who also happens to be a psychopathic cannibal murderer. If you don't know what cannibal means, look it up. No. Humans that eat other humans. Basically, he's serving life sentence for all the murders and eating of all the people he'd done in the past. And basically, they want to interview him because they think that he has some type of insight or can provide some type of like knowledge to help them solve the case. So moving on to number 2, Hannibal, which is kind of a continuation of Silence of the Lambs. It's also based on Dr. Hannibal Lecter, but they did switch the actress who played Clarence to Julianne Moore. It still stars Anthony Hopkins as Dr. Hannibal Lecter. So the director in Hannibal was Ridley Scott, and it starred Gary Oldman as Mason Verger, and this movie got a 39 rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And it runs about 2 hours and 12 minutes, and the movie was released in 2001. I feel like everybody's watched these movies on the list before and you're probably just rewatching them. I'm going to be 100% honest. I'm not going to give you some movies you've maybe never heard of. Sometimes. If that's the case, then yeah. Some of these movies will be movies you've never heard of. But chances are you've heard these movies and watched these movies before if you are in love with horror movies as much as I am. So the reason I said that is because spoiler, he escapes. One of the victims, apparently it was his 6th victim, happened to escape, and now he's horribly disfigured and he's seeking revenge once again. I mean, who wouldn't? Somebody tries to eat you and you know they get out of jail. I would be pissed too. Slightly scared. Maybe he wants to finish his meal, but like, you know. This guy named Mason Verger uses Clarice to as a bait to get him to come out of hiding or whatever. moving on to number 3, The Zodiac Killer. This movie runs about 2 hours and 42 minutes and was released in 2007. It received an 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. The director is Dr. David Fincher. It stars Jake Gyllenhaal as Robert Graysmith, Robert Downey Jr. as Paul Avery, and Mark Ruffalo as Dave Tochi? You guys can go ham in the comments because the way I say these awful names, it's pretty bad. Okay. So basically it's a period piece from the 1960s. If you don't know, there was a guy in the 1960s who killed a bunch of people, and he was referred to as the Zodiac Killer, so this is a movie based off of him. This movie is set in the 1960s of San Francisco, following the murders of a guy that was known as the Zodiac Killer. This guy leaves like these cryptic notes to the police department in order to like leave clues as to like who he killed, or you know, why he killed them or whatever. So Graysmith, Avery, and Toshi tried to find the killer's identity. Yeah, so they tried to figure out who the guy was through all his cryptic messages or whatever. One of the guys who tries to like decipher these messages get completely enthralled in it and obsessed at points. Moving on to number 4, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, I wasn't there. Okay, so I don't know how accurate it was, but this one probably stayed more close to the actual stories and the actual victims. So this movie was released in 2003 and it received a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. It runs about an hour and 53 minutes. The director was Marcus Nispel. Don't know. And it stars Jessica Biel as Aaron, and it stars Andrew Brunitsky, sorry again, as Leatherface, and R. Lee Emery as Sheriff. Now, there was a previous Texas Chainsaw Massacre that was released in 1974. Again, don't like older movies. This is why I chose the remake, just preference again. This movie follows a group of young travelers in about their 20s, and then they encounter a masked serial killer who likes to kill people and chop people up with his chainsaw. So basically, as you may know, they call him Leatherface because he cuts out the face of their victims and then wears it like it's a Halloween mask. And like further into the movie, I just remembered he was using like people's skin as like a lampshade. Like, wouldn't that melt? And like, ew. So moving on to The Strangers. Now this is, I think, maybe the newest or the most recent version of Strangers. This is The Strangers That Pray at Night. So this movie was released in 2017 and it runs about an hour and 40 minutes long, 40% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the director is Johannes Roberts. If I get this right, and I probably don't. The movie stars Bailey Madison as Kingsley, Christina Hendricks as Cindy, Martin Henderson as Mike, and Lewis Pullman as Luke. So basically it's a family of 4, and they end up in this abandoned trailer park where like everybody parks their trailer homes, but apparently everybody's away at vacation or something. I don't know. So they're taking their daughter to some boarding school because she's acting like a brat. So they're using one of their family members' trailer homes to like stay at for a while until they get her to her final destination, but they don't arrive. They never arrive. There's this group of people who just like randomly knock on their door and start terrorizing them and following them around trying to kill them. Moving on to number 6, Chernobyl Diaries. Before I even get into it, I'm gonna say maybe about 5% of this movie is accurate to the Chernobyl accident. If you don't know, there was a nuclear power plant in Russia that exploded. There was an actual documentary series that was done by HBO, and it was actually done really well. And there's like a book or something. There's a lot of information out there about the actual accident that happened in Chernobyl. So yeah, that's the only thing that's probably accurate about the Chernobyl Diaries. This movie runs about an hour and 33 minutes. It was a 19% on Rotten Tomatoes and released in 2012. The director was Bradley Parker. The movie stars Olivia Dooley, as Natalie, Jesse McCartney, who knew, as Chris, and Jonathan Sawatsky as Paul. There's much more of them in the group, but I only include like 3 actors. So again, this movie follows a group of American tourists who follow their tour guide through Pryorot, which is the city where where the nuclear power plant exploded. Apparently they think they're alone, and they're not. They start to get followed and killed off one by one by a group of people who apparently stayed in Chernobyl after the accident and look horribly disfigured. And you don't really see them until like the very end, and there's like a one frame where you can see the actual people. And I paused it at that frame because I was like, oh my god, I want to see, and it was gnarly. Again, not reflective of actual radiation poisoning and what it looks like on the outside. Hollywood version. Okay. Moving on to number 7, The Hills Have Eyes. This movie runs about 1 hour and 48 minutes long, received 52% on Rotten Tomatoes, and released in 2006. The director was Alexandre Aja. It stars Michael Bailey as Pluto. That's okay. It stars Michael Bailey as Pluto, Emily DeRaven as Brenda Carter, and Dan Bird as Bobby Carter. So basically this family gets stranded out the middle of the desert, and apparently this is the same desert where nuclear testing was happening. And apparently these nuclear testing turned these normal everyday humans into cannibalistic monsters. A family of them, so not just one, a whole family of cannibalistic monsters who also happen to live in the caves where this family got stranded in the middle of the desert. So they come out to play. Moving on to number 8, Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, this movie runs about 1 hour 35 minutes, and it got a 15% on Rotten Tomatoes, and was released in 2010. And the director was Samuel Baker. It also stars Katie Cassidy as Chris Fowles, Rory Mara as Nancy Halbrook, Kyle Gallner as Quentin Smith, Jackie Earle Haley as Freddy Krueger. Okay, so basically this movie follows a group of teenagers who lived in the same neighborhood and went to the same elementary school, and they all start to experience the same nightmares. And after a while into the nightmare, like anything that would happen, like if they got physically injured in the nightmare, it would tend to also physically injure them in the real world. Apparently they all had the same killer, which was Freddy Krueger, who wore this Christmas sweater that was like red and green for some reason. And you know, Mr. Freddy Krueger had a glove that was made out of knives. So they try everything that they can to not fall asleep. Moving on to Psycho. So this movie runs about 1 hour and 45 minutes long. It got a 38% on Rotten Tomatoes and was released in 1998. The director was Gus Van Sant. This movie stars Vince Van Gogh as Norman Bates, Ian H. as Marion Crane, and Juliana Moore as Leela Crane. So basically, this Marion character steals from her boss and tries to leave and skip town, and rents a room at this hotel. So she rents this hotel called the Bates Motel, and runs into the mother's son that owns the hotel, which is Norman Bates. And so Norman finds her dead body, and then hides it for some reason. I mean, we all know why, but he hides it. And then the detectives and Marion's sister comes looking for her. Moving on to number 10, Candyman. So the story that this movie is based on is basically this black guy falls in love with a white girl. I think she was married, maybe she wasn't, I don't know. But it was during the time when it wasn't acceptable to be an interracial couple. The other people in the town of where this couple lives in decides that is not okay, and they kill him by pouring honey on him and letting 1,000 bees sting him to death. going on to the movie. This movie runs about an hour and 41 minutes long. It got a 74% on Rotten Tomatoes and was released in 1992. The director was Bernard Rose, and it stars Tony Todd as Daniel Robatelli, don't know how to say it, gonna stop trying, Virginia Madsen as Helen Lynn, and Bernard Ross as Archie Walsh. So basically there's a group of these researchers that research superstitions, and they learned about the Candyman legend, and then Helen specifically doesn't believe in it and wants to disprove it. Obviously Helen has to try this Candyman, you know, say it 3 times in the mirror, he's gonna appear and kill you. Helen comes to the reality that maybe this superstition has some truth to it. If you watch this video all the way through, please comment down the either a film strip, a camera, or the old way of recording movies where it was like on a stand and it was like a, anyways, if you know what I'm talking about, comment down below. So like, comment, subscribe, because YouTube's make me say this, and yeah, bye.